All right, daily question for you. As
Yep.
morbid as the rest of the episode's going to be,
Okay.
what would be your preferred age number to die at?
I'd say late 80s.
You got to choose a specific.
Okay. 88.
Why 88?
Because I don't actually really want to live that long. But also, if I were to die in my 60s or 70s, I wouldn't get to experience my kids'
Mhm.
adulthood. Like right now, my parents are in my 60s and your grandparents are in their 70s,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And
Getting into
so,
their 80s.
yeah, like it's enough to experience having great grandkids, but not
Yeah.
having to be around for very long.
Yeah, because you don't want to live in your 90s with me.
I would like to live with you as long as I can. And also, I'm okay with dying whenever. The Lord can just take me.
It's a good response. Good response. I think mine would be 93. And I think it's
Oh,
because,
that's kind of cool.
isn't that a prime number?
Yes. 9 plus 3 is 12. So no. Yeah, 93 is divisible by 3.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so 97. I'm going to add another 4 years to my life
Okay.
because I think it's a prime number. My great grandfather died at 93. Feel like it's a nice old age. 97. I think ending on a prime number feels nice to me. You know,
Okay.
if I'm calling it, I may as well have fun with the number, right?
Sure. I just want to die in my sleep. That's
Oh
kind of
yeah,
my main hope is like that's how my grandma died. My great grandma was in her sleep. And I
yeah,
mean, I'm sure there were a lot of things going on in her body, but like
sure.
I just kind of hope to like go to sleep one night and then just not wake up.
See, I think my preference would be to experience all of the things that happen when we die in our brains. Because
Hmm.
if you look at all of the chemical dumps that occur in the process of death and dying, it's super fascinating. And it sounds like such a intriguing process to experience that I'd
Hmm.
almost feel bummed out sleeping through it. Because it dumps
Hmm.
so many endorphins and oxytocin and all of these other chemicals to aid in the process of dying.
But that's like in a slow death, right?
Yeah, that's
You wouldn't experience that in like a car death or
possibly.
somebody stabbing you.
Possibly. It kind of depends. My goal would be to die in a peaceful way where I still get to
Got
experience
it.
that process of death.
I do think I don't know. I think it would be really cool. It sounds this whole episode's going to be morbid, so
So
everything's going
morbid.
to sound morbid. I've heard of somebody recently who knew that their grandma was dying and they were like sitting in the room with her wherever she was.
Yeah.
And they were just praying over her. They were singing worship songs. Like
Mhm.
it was just like almost like a welcome to heaven on earth kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think that sounds nice of like, hey, let's spend my last moments on earth praying and
Yeah.
worshiping and spending time with the Lord together as a family. Like, I just think that sounds really peaceful and a nice way to go.
Yeah. I agree with that one. That one sounds nice.
Yeah.
Okay, so today's conversation is all about crafting our own funerals because we're really going to just lean into the morbidity. But I actually coincidentally went to a funeral yesterday and it brought
Mm-hmm.
up a whole bunch of thoughts about this whole situation and even realizing how low my death anxiety feels, where
Mm.
I think death right now, it does feel really far away for me,
Yeah.
but at the same time, doesn't feel very intimidating. I think painful death feels intimidating, but that's probably true of anyone, anywhere, no matter how healthy you
Mm-hmm.
actually are.
Yeah.
But I think it brought up a lot of meaningfulness to how I live my life and what it says about how I'm living my life when I lay out what I want for my funeral.
Hmm.
So, first off, because we can generally categorize things a couple ways,
Okay.
right? Are you, for your own funeral,
Mm-hmm.
do you want it to be a celebration of life or do you want it to be a tried and true funeral?
Celebration of life.
Really?
Yep.
Oh, this is gonna be a fun conversation.
Are you on the other end?
Oh, I'm so far on the other end.
Interesting.
So far. You'll figure out how far. Okay, so tell me why you want celebration of life.
Okay. Well, let me ask a follow-up question
Okay.
before we jump into that.
Yeah.
Do you want to be cremated or do you want to be in a casket?
Ooh. If I actually got my option outside of those two choices, I think I'd want that human capsule that they put a tree into,
Oh,
and then the
yeah.
tree grows around your corpse.
Okay.
They like essentially
So they don't cremate you for that?
no, so they take your body, they dig a hole down, and they put you in this pod that's full of biodegradable substances, and they help the
Sure.
decomposition of your body.
Yeah.
And then they plant a tree on top of the pod, and then the tree is feeding off of your nutrients
Yeah.
as it's growing.
Okay.
That would be my preference.
Okay. I thought you had to be cremated for that.
No, because if you get cremated, um, who is it? Neil deGrasse Tyson actually did a whole thing on this. He said that cremation is probably one of the worst things you could do with your body
Really?
because you're wasting the energy of your body
Huh.
entirely. There's nothing that gets to go anywhere beneficial.
Okay. Well, I was going to say that I want to be a tree, but I thought I needed to be cremated. But also, side question.
Yeah.
Obviously, God can do anything.
Yeah.
When he calls the dead to life, do you think that it matters if they were cremated versus not cremated?
I think we've been around long enough that a lot of the first people who followed God, their bones don't even exist in full matter anymore.
Sure.
And so it probably doesn't matter.
Okay. Yeah, I know. I mean, obviously we can't limit God,
Right.
but I was like, wait a minute.
I mean, there is.
Like when you picture it, like dead bodies coming to life, like even when Jesus was resurrected and like dead bodies came to life, then they
Okay.
had to have bodies.
Well, yes. And if it's the passage I think you're referencing where Jesus dies and the bodies came out of the tombs.
Yeah. Doesn't mean that they were alive. They just came out of the tombs.
Yeah, because there was an earthquake, and out of Golgotha, where they had a whole bunch of tombs, all of the bodies would have basically mudslid down into the city of
Mhm.
Jerusalem as the
Yeah.
curtains breaking and as darkness covers the world. And it just is one of the coolest things in all of scripture to picture that way.
Well, okay. So, number one, I don't want to be in a casket.
Okay,
I don't want to have a viewing of my dead body
great.
because I've seen dead bodies before, at least like once or twice at funerals,
Yeah,
and their soul is not in that
Yeah.
body. That body is not that person. And I have not found any relief or any kind of closure from seeing their dead body.
same.
And so I wouldn't want an open casket. I don't even want to be in a casket.
Great.
I do want my body to be used. So number one, I mean, that sounds kind of bad, but I'm an organ donor.
Okay,
So
yeah.
I want them to take whatever they can out of my body to give life to somebody else.
Sure.
Which, I mean, if I die at old age, I don't know that they can
Yeah.
really do that, but they can have it.
You can have your amazing heart to study for science.
Yeah, they can study it. Yeah. I mean, they probably don't want my lungs,
No.
but everything else I think is pretty okay. I don't know, but,
Yeah.
but they can have it all. So I want that. And then at one point you and I had discussed, and I think this is really cool.
Mhm.
We had discussed, I think this part does require cremation
I
though.
think
We had discussed being made into a diamond together that would be passed on through our family, which I think is kind of cool, but also
yeah.
kind of creepy because it's like, look, this is my grandma and grandpa. Which
You
I
mean their ring? No, it's actually
no,
them.
they were cremated into a diamond. So that'd be dope, but that's also very expensive.
Yeah.
So, and I haven't actually looked into the tree thing, but so back to your original question.
Yeah.
I would want it to be a celebration of life, but I would want it to be like a planting of that tree pod
Oh, interesting.
and like, hey, let's sit around together, let's have some food, hang out, have music, and tell each other all the stories that we love about Brie. Like,
yeah.
I remember when Brie did this, or I remember when I spent my time with my mom or with my grandma. I'm both of those, the
Yeah.
grandma and the mom.
Yeah, I heard it.
And that, and I just want them to really be like, man, we loved Brie. This is what she was all about. We want to honor her. and we want to plant this tree together and then come back to it. And
Yeah.
I mean, maybe they water it, maybe they put stuff on the tree, but I want it to be like, I don't know. I guess I really should have studied that. I don't know if can they just plant the tree anywhere?
I would imagine not, just because it is human waste
Okay.
still. Like,
So they couldn't like if we had like family property at that point, they couldn't
I mean,
put my body tree on
who's
the
gonna
property.
stop us?
I'm sure somebody would stop us. It's
Somebody's gonna
different
try
when
to
it's
stop us.
it's different when it's like a dog that you can
Yeah.
bury in your backyard or a cow, according to your parents.
Let's say for sake of this episode, we get special permissions to do it
Okay. Yeah.
where we need to.
I would want to be in one location, hopefully on like a family property. Or I'm hoping that we would have like a homestead or
Oh,
something
okay.
at that point that we could be buried on and that'd be like, oh, I'm sitting under grandma's tree today. And this is
Yeah.
where like I want people to read under it. And
Mm,
I want that to be my legacy. I mean, now that you've said Neil deGrasse Tyson does not suggest cremation, I mean, I believe that. And also I don't love the idea of okay, a couple things about cremation.
yeah.
Number one, you don't know that the ashes that you're getting are actually only that person's
Uh-huh.
ashes. They could be somebody else's ashes as well, which
And
creeps
there's a
me out.
lot of formaldehyde in the ashes.
And if you split up the ashes, so if my ashes go between our two children, it kind of creeps me out because it's like, what part of the body did they get? Like,
Your left toe.
does she? Yeah, and who has my butt? And do they really want it? You know,
I call dibs on your butt. Your butt ashes.
butt ashes. And then also like thinking about spreading ashes kind of grosses me out too because number one, like it's pretty cliche to spread your ashes like in the ocean or something. Number one, I don't like the ocean. Number two, that's just like pouring a dead body into the ocean, which
it's also illegal.
is gross.
Yeah.
Also, if I were to like leave it on a hike, I mean, my ashes are just gonna blow everywhere,
Right.
and for all we know, that's gonna blow into your eyes, and then you've got all of a sudden you got grandma on your eyeballs, and that just gross. And so, I want to be a tree. I want my presence, like I want it to give more life. I think that's
Yeah.
kind of what I'm going for. So, in moments of death, I want to spend it in worship and prayer, and recognizing the life that the Lord has given me, and then in my celebration of life, I want it to be like, man, I want to live like Bree did. And every time I sit under this tree, which I gave life to that tree from my dead body, and my great great grandkids get to sit under that tree and read, and it provides shade. And like, I want it to be somewhere where they go, not just like out in the middle of like, here's a tree, boop, like in a desert, but I want it to be like somewhere where they would enjoy the shade of the tree.
Okay, I have two similar but separate questions.
Okay.
If you were to die next week, what
Mhm.
would be one of the accomplishments you'd want to be celebrated at your celebration of life? And if you die at your 88 age, what's the thing that is between now and then that you'd want to be celebrated? And I'm not saying that it has to be the best thing or the most wonderful thing. It can just be, it's on my mind right now. This is one of the things.
I think if I were to die next week, what I would want to be celebrated is like, man, I really enjoyed being in Bree's presence. I enjoyed spending time with her. Like, I don't think it's anything specific that I have done.
Yeah.
But I just want it to be like, man, I really liked being with her, and I'm sad that I don't get to be.
Yeah, that's good.
And at 88, I mean, I think I'd still want it to be that, but I think, or what I hope for is, and I have several years to achieve this, but I want it to be like a man. I really love spending time with Bree because it felt like I was spending time with Jesus.
Yeah, I like that.
And I don't know that people could say that about me next week, but I'm hoping they could say
You're
that.
working on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I don't think, I mean, sure, it'd be cool to talk about my accomplishments, but that's all just dust. Like, I want it to be about more how I treat people.
Yeah.
And who I am as a human than what I accomplished.
Which is as good a
transition.
Yeah. Yeah. As good a transition as ever into one of the areas that I think we're going to also differ here.
Okay.
Because one of my big pet peeves, which came up in the funeral that I was at this weekend,
Yeah.
is when the pastor gets up and talks. One, okay, real quick, pet peeve. If anyone talks at my funeral who obviously did not know me and is only pulling content from what they've heard at the funeral, don't let them talk.
Mhm.
They have no right to be there,
Yeah.
which was true of this pastor. He got up. He had no idea who this person was, even though she was part of the congregation. Made me mad. But then he gets up and he starts talking about his own life, which another pet peeve. Don't talk about your own life at somebody else's funeral unless that person was in your life.
Mhm.
I was really mad for like 20 minutes because it also lasted 20 minutes. Also, don't let somebody talk for 20 minutes at my funeral, please.
Great.
I lost myself on where I am in my pet peeve. Here we are. Okay. I actually really dislike when funerals turn into poor sales pitches for following Jesus.
Hmm.
Now, I'm not against the idea of let this be something where somebody who doesn't know Jesus comes to the funeral and sees how Jesus was present throughout my life. That
Mhm.
totally, that's fine, right?
Yeah.
It's the getting up and giving a message that's purely evangelical
Mhm.
and purely and like a bad pitch too. It's not even a
Yeah.
good one. It's just a here's the truth about why you shouldn't be sad and here is why you should be happy instead and you should follow Jesus.
Mhm.
I hate that. I think it feels so out of touch with what's happening there. And I
Yeah.
think it feels so inappropriate to the message of the funeral and the message of following Christ, which actually shouldn't be that far apart, anyways.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree with the poor giving of the gospel essentially. I would hope that like at my celebration of life that it would be just evident in my life and that would be enough to
Yeah.
speak the gospel of like, man, this is who Bree was and it just speaks highly of Jesus. The one funeral in which I experienced a gospel message was actually really well done and it wasn't cringy and it wasn't bad. And I mean, it was just hard because it was a funeral for a student who
Mm,
had completed suicide. And I mean, she was like, I mean, she had graduated, I think, and was maybe 19 or 20 when she killed herself. And at her funeral, they were just like, man, if you just have the hope of Jesus in your life, this doesn't have to be you. Like,
mm,
don't follow in her footsteps, but instead, like, turn to Jesus.
yeah.
And I just think it was really well done at that
Sure.
point. But yeah, that's another thing. That's maybe another reason why I don't want a funeral and instead want a celebration of life is because I actually want to be surrounded by the people who knew me, not the
Mm.
people assigned to me.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Because even like our pastor, does he know my name? Yes, he does.
Yeah.
Does he know that I lead his children and youth group? Yes, he does. Is he pretty connected to our family? Like
Yeah. He knows
all
my
of your
siblings
brothers?
really well.
Yeah, he does. Does he know me enough to speak about my life? No, he does not.
No.
I don't think he knows what I do for a living.
Yeah.
I don't think he really knows my personality. Shoot, at this point, I think Colin has a better idea of me because
Right.
we've had weirder conversations
Yeah.
together or just more conversations.
Yep.
But I just don't want some pastor who's assigned to me to be like, let's talk about Bree and all the good things that she did in her life. I'm like, no, can you just let Trevor talk about me?
Yeah.
Or, I mean, I know it'd be really hard, but I want it to be more like a sitting around a campfire being like, man, do you remember when we did this together?
Yeah.
Like, that was amazing. And I really loved seeing Bree there and I really loved spending time with her. Like, that's why I want
Yeah.
more of a celebration of life. And I don't want it like at a church necessarily. I
Sure.
like literally want it to be like a cookout.
Yeah. Yeah. That fits you really well, especially if we have outdoor games and
Yeah.
are
Yeah. Like
playing.
just hang out,
Yeah.
eat, acknowledge my life
Yeah.
and who I was to you and be sad if
Yeah.
you're sad, but also just like I want people to really remember the good
Mm.
and try really hard to forget the bad.
Yeah.
Don't think about all the things you hate about me.
Oh gosh. I'm sure that will not be hard at all.
Okay, but like what about you? So you don't want a celebration of
I do
life.
not.
You want a traditional
Yeah.
funeral.
I dislike
So do you want a
celebrations of life.
casket?
No, I've learned a lot about post-death processes, and it's so much of a burden for the people who have to take charge
Yeah.
of it. And so, honestly, if my body could just evaporate when I die,
Yeah.
that would be really pleasant. I'd be able to leave feeling really happy
Yeah.
because then there's nothing that you have to take care of, right? And I don't want it to be an expensive thing because funerals are crazy expensive.
Yeah.
I don't want you to have to use any of our life insurance money for that because that sucks too, right?
Yeah. I mean,
So
as long as you're not making me buy a $10,000 casket, then we should be okay.
hopefully, yeah. I think that the human pod thing actually costs as much as cremation or
Sure.
actual burial, but
But you're buying something
yeah,
better.
you're buying a tree. It's just a really expensive tree.
Yes, but you're doing a lot more with it, and
Yeah,
it's not just gonna sit in the ground and decompose.
totally.
And like, why do people even buy like $10,000 caskets when they're literally never gonna see it
I
again?
don't know. My great grandparents, they bought the top end casket when they were in their 30s, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And every 5 or 10 years, they'd get a call from the funeral home saying, "Hey, we no longer carry that casket and we've increased our best of the line." And so I think they originally had bought like $300 caskets.
Yeah.
And then they got buried in really expensive caskets
Mm-hmm.
because they just kept upgrading the casket since they had bought the top of the line.
Yep.
So that's one way to do it.
Just crazy. Okay, but back to you.
Yeah, so I'd want it to be cheap and I'd want my body to not be as a very big inconvenience to handle,
Mm-hmm.
but I absolutely do not want a celebration of life. I want a funeral. I
Sure.
want and I don't even know if funeral is the right word. I want a lament ceremony.
Mm,
I want people to be together who know me,
mm-hmm.
and it's okay if they know me tertiarily
Sure.
as long as they're not the ones that are on stage talking,
Yeah.
right? Um, but I've been doing a lot of study of lament lately, and a third of the psalms are laments. A lot of our hymns back in the day were laments. We just don't
Mm-hmm.
have laments anymore. So I'd want laments to be played at the funeral,
Mm,
and not in a way of like, oh, the world is over because Trevor's gone, but in a it is actually sad and against what was planned for Trevor to be gone.
mm,
And this is the state of our world, that it is filled with death. I love Tozer's quote that I've kind of rearranged a little bit of, we are eternal beings longing for permanence in a world that's constantly reminding us of death and change.
mhm,
And so to sit in that place of, this is a moment that's reminding us of death and change, and we are rightful to be filled with sorrow, and to
mhm,
come to God and say, "Why, God? Where are you? Where are you in this moment? What's happening
mhm,
in our lives that you would allow death and destruction to come into our world and to
mhm.
upset the things that we have?" And to follow the structure of laments, which is, here's the complaint that I have, here's the crisis that I'm in, and then the turn that, ooh, this would make me so mad real quick. If the turn is into, here's why you should be happy instead, I will rise out of that tree and slap y'all, because it so invalidates the grief to say, we
Mhm.
shouldn't be sad, Trevor's in heaven.
Yeah.
Okay, what, those are two separate things, they do not actually
Yeah,
have to tie in together.
absolutely.
And so I think it's the turn from the complaint and the crisis into one of, here's what we know is true about you, God. Here's what
Mm,
we know is true about our existence and about the future,
mhm.
right? And not the cheesy, we're going to see Trevor in heaven someday, but the, we know that there is separation here and now
Mhm.
between you and us, God, and that Trevor is one step closer to losing that separation,
Yeah.
but we're still stuck here
Yeah.
in the midst of the separation.
Yeah.
And I think that for me, and I think it would probably be hard. Okay, I'm going to make an exception because my funeral plan is so intense theologically.
Yeah.
I'm okay with you finding an expert in lamenting to speak at my funeral.
Andrew would probably be really great at
I'm sure
that. So
Andrew would actually be really good at that.
if he's not dead by the time you
Yeah.
die, I'll call on him.
Right. I can that is an acceptable exception.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think, I mean, even in the funeral that I went to yesterday, there were a lot of moments where I just needed to be in my sorrow and my grief.
Yeah.
And I just needed to weep and
Mm-hmm.
to wail.
Yeah.
And wailing's not acceptable in our Western culture. It should be. You're allowed to wail at my funeral. Please do.
I will.
Please. That'd be great. But I just needed to sit in my sorrow and my
Yeah.
grief. And it felt like every person who would come up to say something was trying to alleviate
The
the
grief.
grief
Yeah.
instead of allowing a permissiveness
Yeah.
to be filled with grief alongside other people who are filled with grief.
Yeah.
And I think there's a performance timing to it, right?
Sure.
I'm not saying that you have to just cry the entire time. There's moments for that levity. Like
Mm-hmm.
laughter can be salve to grief,
Yeah.
but you don't have to lather me up with salve. Sometimes I
Right.
just need it to air out.
Yeah. 100%. I like that because it feels kind to those who are grieving your life. And I think that what's funny is I was just thinking like, man, we should just play this episode at our funeral so they can hear really like what we thought
Yeah.
about and what we wanted. But I'm wondering, so I'm going to put another stipulation on my celebration of life.
Okay.
In that, let's just say I die next week. I don't want the celebration of life to happen for like a month.
Huh.
Because I want to give space for grief, but I
Hmm.
want it to be more of a private grief. Like,
Oh, I see.
in that I want people to grieve in the way that they need to grieve. And if that means my family gets together and they all sit and they sob and they wail,
Yeah.
that they don't have a bunch of strangers around them
Hmm.
while they're sobbing and wailing, but that they get to sit in their grief together, that they kind of get to deal with it. It's not going to go
Yeah.
away. Grief comes in waves, but like the bulk of it, when you're really feeling the loss
Yeah.
of someone that you love, I want them to have that time to grieve. So that's why I'm saying like about a month. I don't know
Yeah.
what they would do with my body between then. We'll figure that out. But have about a month to grieve. And then at the end of that month, be like, okay, we've sobbed, we've wailed.
Yeah.
Let's think about all the good things and let's really remember her and let's plant this tree.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like a signal of like, we can move on with our lives. We can still feel our grief,
Yeah.
but like you can feel the grief under the tree. You can like come back to it. You can, I don't know. I just want it to be more of like, we can talk about the hard things. We can talk about our losses and sit in that grief. And because I think what's so hard, or what I really don't appreciate about funerals, is how it's like, hey, Trevor, your wife just died. Plan a funeral for tomorrow.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, she died yesterday. Can you give me a minute?
Right.
Like, I'm still just trying to grasp that. Why
Yeah.
do things have to turn around so quickly? Is it because we have a body to take care of?
Probably.
Well, then you plant the tree. You're all sobbing and wailing, and then a month later.
So we're gonna have a tree planting moment.
Yeah.
That's intimate.
Yeah.
And then the celebration of life.
Yes.
I think that sells me on the celebration of life because I feel like that's still so respectful of the grieving process.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing that I have a hard time with. Of even yesterday's funeral was supposed to be a celebration of life, but I don't think they fully understood the difference or what that's supposed to mean. And she died like 10 days ago.
Okay.
And so it's still this very immediate loss.
Mm-hmm.
And so to so abruptly have to jump into this place of, woohoo, we're going to be joined with her in heaven, feels so inauthentic.
Yeah.
But having a month, especially if there's this opportunity for that intimate grief, that actually feels really good. Really
well, and I like your idea of lamenting, and I think that speaks a lot to you, and we could like write poems about that as well, and like just kind of sit in I almost want to call it the liturgy, but that's probably the wrong.
Fair.
just like sit in the liturgy of like, no, let's like experience this. This is sad. We're struggling, and that's
Yeah.
okay. And Trevor wouldn't have been afraid of that.
Nope.
Like he wouldn't have been afraid of your feelings,
Nope.
and we can deal with them. And also like, yeah, I think it's a both because I mean even so recently my mom's first husband died. And
Mhm.
he's the dad to my first two siblings, my oldest two siblings. And I think he died on a Saturday, and then his funeral was on the following Thursday. And they had, I mean, his current wife, I mean, had it all planned out because I think he was in hospice. They
Oh,
were
sure.
prepping for it. But also, it's just like, golly, that's just such a big burden on somebody who
Yeah.
just lost somebody.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry, but I just know how overwhelmed I will be when I lose you, regardless of what age it is,
Yeah.
that I'm gonna be like, I can't plan his funeral
Yeah.
right now.
Just take care of my body.
Yeah.
And then when there's more air in your lungs to be able to
Yeah.
handle it, then take care of the funeral.
Right. Yeah. Because I think like if we can even just shoot, maybe even it comes down to trees take a long time
Yeah.
to grow. Maybe it's like you plant the tree when you're real sad, and then you do a celebration of life the year later.
Sure.
I mean, it's still not going to have that much growth,
Yeah.
but it's
Also,
going
I
to be
want
done.
my tree next to yours,
Yeah.
but also I want you to die after me.
Okay.
So
We can just
that's
die
my
at the same
request.
time, notebook style.
That sounds great. Oh, back to your concept about playing this episode at
Mm.
funerals too. I was thinking about this yesterday too, that I feel like I've produced a lot of content of me talking, and
Mm.
it's been on meaningful life stuff. It hasn't been just fluffy fun, although
Yeah.
there's some of that. I think it would be cool to have someone go through some of that and pull out pieces that feel like they apply so that I
Mm.
get to, because I think the hard part is not for any sake of vanity, but for the desire of this being the kind of funeral that I want. I feel like I'm missing out.
Yeah.
And so being able to pull in things that I've created
Yeah.
feels like I get to participate in this thing that I would want to participate
Sure.
in. Right?
It's like a memorial
Yeah.
of like here's Trevor's accomplishments. Like let's acknowledge them and
Not even that, but like pulling lines to
oh
be able
sure.
to put to it. So, pulling a line of something I said in an old podcast or a
Yeah.
video or something that feels like it ties in, and just the clip. It doesn't have to be,
Sure.
here's all the stuff, Trevor. That's not the point. It's that if anybody had a funeral like this, I would want to go
Mm.
and participate.
Yeah.
And if it's mine, I don't get that opportunity,
Right.
but maybe you pull a clip or two where it feels like I
Yeah.
get to participate a little bit.
Well, and I think that's kind of the interesting thing too, is because I mean we're talking about something that we'll never get to experience.
Yeah.
And so this is almost like I think it actually feels like an act of kindness to the people who know you and love you
Mhm.
to do something that you think that they need because you're
Yeah.
dead. You don't get to experience it.
Right.
I mean, I would still want it to be the things that you want, but ultimately, like, I think our kindness in letting people grieve
Yeah.
and then celebrate life, I think is just a really kind way for the people around us who love us to just celebrate
Yeah.
our lives and to grieve. And yeah, I don't know, because funerals aren't for us. They're
Right.
not. We don't get to experience them.
No. Well, and I
But I
even
know for a fact that if slash when you die, it's not really an if, but it's more
Yeah.
of like a if you die before me kind
Yeah.
of thing and I have to experience it, I'm gonna be sitting in heavy, heavy grief
Oh yeah.
for a long time, and I'm gonna be down for the count, and I'm not gonna be able to do anything that would really honor you
Yeah.
for a while. And I just need that time. And I mean, it sounds like I can have that time with
Absolutely.
what you are requesting. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think there's this care I have in me for the people I love, that death feels sorrowful just because of what I leave them to,
Mhm.
not so much that my story's done.
Yeah. It's like
Right?
what do I leave in my wake?
Yeah. And I think that my my greatest sadness with that would be that it feels so burdensome,
Mhm.
and not like, it's not the classic thing where everybody's gonna be like, it's not a burden, it's your like,
It'd
when
be 100% a
it's
burden.
absolutely a
You
burden.
do a lot for this family that I don't even touch, and I
Yeah.
would absolutely feel your
Yeah.
absence.
If you die on me before 88, we're in big trouble. At 88, we're also in big
Okay, to be
trouble,
fair
but we can
though,
deal
you
with
have
that
to think about
differently.
it's not like we really get to choose, but if I die at 88 and then you live almost 10 more
I
years,
know. Maybe I'll still get remarried.
I mean, if you're still alive, there's a lot of single women at that point.
I'll just get a really good roommate. That'll be sufficient.
Yeah. You and
Yeah.
Adam can just be in a room together.
Although I don't think that even if you were to die at 88, I would have to deal with much in the next 10 or so years, because
Sure.
I don't know if it would feel like living after you left.
Hmm.
Like, I think it would feel like
Getting by, getting
just
through
getting
it.
by.
Yeah.
Just, I'm here. Like, I think Billy Graham even talks about that in his book, Coming Home, or I think it's called Coming Home, where he talks about how many mornings he woke up. And I think his wife's name was Ruth or Ruthie, I think. And she had died, I want to say 7 or 10 years before he died. And he would wake up in the morning and just pray and be like, God, I'm tired of doing life without her. Can I just be done? Can my race be finished?
Yeah.
And I feel like I'd probably be in the same place, even if you were to die next week. So don't die on me next week.
Try not to.
Otherwise, I think neither of us is realistically allowed to die in the next, I'd say, 12 months, or this episode is going to be really rough. So
yeah, I'd be like, wow, you guys just spoke that into existence. And
Right.
we're like, well, our bad.
Yeah,
It's not like-
sorry.
can't predict your death.
No.
And we're not predicting it now.
Yeah. But at least we'll know what to do
Yeah, we
afterwards.
straight up told you at the beginning of this we wanted to die at 88 and 97. So
Yep.
if we die sooner than that, it's not our fault.
Yeah.
We didn't do it. Well, I mean, this would be kind of a hard dinner conversation. It'd be
Yeah.
much more of a mellow, solemn kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I mean, this has made me think about stuff that I wouldn't have thought of without having had this conversation. And I think it's important stuff because, I mean, not only do we need to create a will.
Yeah, we do.
LOL. Haven't done that, but we need to.
Sorry, kids.
We need to do that. But I think there's like, I ultimately want to honor the people I love by giving them what they desire for their end of life ceremony. And I can't do that if I don't know it.
Yeah.
And so, but also, I mean, for a dinner table conversation, I mean, yeah, like ask that question of like, what would you want for your funeral or celebration of life? How do you, what do you want out of that? But also like talk about like, what's the weirdest thing you'd want to do with your body or whatever? Like, do you want to be turned into a diamond or like, do you care about what Neil deGrasse Tyson says about cremation or I don't know, try to have some light-hearted conversations around that.
It doesn't have to all be sorrowful. I think it's that laughter is the salve of grief. Sometimes we have to laugh through it in order for it to be tolerable.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel the same way preparing for this episode. And being at the funeral yesterday really made me think about, okay, have I lived my life in a way that feels like I would be worthy of the honor that I'm anticipating in this sort of funeral? And again, it doesn't feel like a vanity thing. Like I don't want people coming in and just praising my accomplishments, but I want people to be able to come in and share an authentic memory of who I was and what I did and how I saw people. And that there can be this sitting with something honorable or worthy of honor, right? And have I lived a life that accomplishes that so far?
Yeah.
And thinking about the places that I feel like maybe I have, the places that I wish I could more, the people that I hope when I do die recognize my fingerprints in different areas, because I think that just feels very fulfilling. It feels like that generativity versus stagnation stage of development of there's something past me once I die. Even though,
Yeah.
in 300 years, nobody's going to remember I lived. And 300 years after that, nobody's going to remember the person that forgot that I was alive. It's,
We're all just dust.
we're all
And
dust.
to dust we will return.
Mhm. A verse I don't want spoken at the funeral. I don't want cliched verses. Choose some of the good ones, the hipster verses.
I'm trying to think of a verse.
Like, oh my gosh, they did the
Jesus
Jeremiah.
wept.
They did the Jeremiah 29 verse.
Oh gosh.
Oh, I'm telling you, I was so angry for 20 minutes. So angry. If you read the Jeremiah, that wasn't even on my birth announcement. I'm pretty sure my birth announcement was, I've called you to spread the word of God, and people are going to come against you, and there's going to be suffering and death. Like, I'm pretty sure that was on my birth announcement. Because my mom thought it felt more true than anything else. Like,
Than a Jeremiah verse.
yeah. Well, it was the Jeremiah verse. It was the one where Jeremiah gets called.
Sure.
And then rightly so afterwards, Jeremiah's like, but God, that doesn't sound good.
Yeah.
Well, and that was, I think there's this interesting thing too, where if it wasn't so tied to you and me, it would be almost worthwhile to switch it, where I do the lament for you and you do the celebration for me, because then you actually get to experience it.
Oh, sure.
But then it feels so far removed from
I mean, you did say that you'd be fine with a celebration of life if we did it like I'm
fine with
suggested.
you having a celebration of life that way. I don't know if I'm fine with me getting a celebration of life that way.
Okay.
Because I think that feels inauthentic to me.
Okay, sure.
Like, it doesn't feel like how it feels like the wrong person writing the epilogue. Right? Like, the epilogue's tone just feels too far off.
Yeah, that's fair.
And I think the same for you. Like, if I was to do the lament for you, it's not the right tone.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, I hope we get to live long lives, and I hope we get to die together.
A long life full of years.